Hello and welcome to Animation Essays podcast. I'm Julia Smuts Louw, and in this episode I'm very excited to be paying a visit to Free Lives. The Cape Town-based indie gaming studio first made waves in 2012, when they busted every conceivable expectation with their maiden title on Steam, Broforce. Their follow-up, Genital Jousting, showed that truly nothing is off-limits in the pursuit of gaming excellence. We chatted to mastermind developer Ruan Rothmann and senior artist Marcelle Marais about the company's spectacularly violent first adventure in VR, GORN, and the innovative game physics that makes it so very special.
GORN has done a little bit better than we expected so far, which is always nice. We haven't really done the first update yet, so we're doing a big update coming out in about 2 weeks. There's so much new stuff, and hopefully it's gonna reinvigorate and help the game do even better. And I think it's a bit of a smaller scope because it's a VR game, but we've just had that expectation of, the upper limit for how well the game can do is much lower because it's VR, and we've just scaled down the production to match. So, it's helped with profitability, I guess, of the game.
But so, Ruan, you started out with your own release, right?
Yeah, it did well even there.
Yeah.
So our process for finding which projects are actually worth making is just...
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's like a good segue into that. So just do game jams and do experiments as much as we can, like often in our free time, or if there's no project actively being developed in work hours, do an experiment, put it online for free and see how people react to it. So that's how GORN originated. I wanted to make this VR thing, and I hadn't seen somebody else really make that thing specifically yet, so I spent, I think, about even like a month on it because we didn't have an active project. And then after about a month, I put a free demo online, made a Reddit post about it, and it just kind of went from there. It just had a really good reaction from the very good start. So that reaction was like, okay, this is clearly a game that people want and a game that has potential. And from there, it's like, okay, now we can allocate like actual resources more than just one person's time into making this game.
So when you say you hadn't seen something like that before, is that like a first-person hack and slash for VR?
There are obviously like lots of sword fighting games in VR, but they're not quite as physics driven as GORN. So if you switch your sword like lots of the other games and it just goes through a guy, or he doesn't react properly to it, he just plays like some kind of static pain animation, the game doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like you're actually hitting something. And you can get away with that in a traditional game, like say like something like Dark Souls. If the enemy just plays some kind of pain animation, it doesn't appear as disjointed. I mean, part of it is because you have a AAA budget, and part of it is just because you don't get to see it in as much detail if you're watching it on the 2D screen where the camera is like several meters away from the enemy. Or in GORN, the camera is like 1 meter away, so he has to react in a specific way. And then just other things related to physics and emergence and player freedom that the other games weren't focused on, which I felt was the gap.
So is it like, for instance, where you can pick up a hacked off limb and
Right.
use that as a weapon? Is
Exactly.
that like an emergent property of the game?
Yeah. So this is like, I think GORN as a designer, there's this thing where the player is continually wondering and asking, sometimes even like out loud, I wonder if I can do X. And the goal as designer in GORN is to keep having that answer be yes as long as possible. So it's like, can I pick up this weapon off the ground? Yes. Can I throw this weapon and does it work if I throw it? And yes. And then it like hits his head and his head pops off. And then it's like, oh, can I pick up this head? Yes. Can I use the head as a weapon? Yes. Can I grab this guy who's on the ground? Yes. Can I like pull off his arm? Yes. Can I use this arm as a weapon? And like keep on trying to like have that answer be yes as long as possible.
So do you troubleshoot in terms of trying to think of stuff that you hadn't thought of that a user might try to do?
Yeah, a lot of it is like watching, and like you watch a person play and you see them try to do something that you hadn't thought of, and then it's like, oh well, there's the first time that he ran into like a no for that question. So now it's like, can I incorporate that into a game? Is that like feasible? And what should happen when the player tries to do this specific thing?
I know you've had overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam.
Yeah, we just crossed the threshold of enough reviews for it to be able to count as that.
Nice.
But it's like, I think if we get one more negative review, we're gonna be back to very positive or whatever.
One of my favorites is, so far while playing I've punched my girlfriend in the gut while I was stabbing another gladiator. Still the most rewarding VR game thus far. So
we did try to warn people with the original trailer that, you know, there's bound to be some collateral damage, but not many people heeded that warning, it seems.
Marcelle, in terms of the designer, you were mostly involved in terms of designing characters and animation?
To a degree. I mean, there were quite a couple of people involved in this project, and it's kind of just been like a relay process. So when I joined, like a fair amount of stuff had been done. But that was quite a while back, and I think it's come quite a way from where it was. But like I'm trying to say, that a lot of the groundwork was kind of set up by David and Phil, who are other members of Free Live's team at the beginning of the project. So yeah, don't know if that answers the question correctly.
Yeah, I guess so. What has it been like? What's been your favorite part about it? Like for me, it would be the weapons, I guess.
Yeah, the weapons were cool, but I think like my favorite part is coming into work and like not necessarily always the days. Like yesterday's work will be implementing the game, but Ruan's very fast at implementing stuff. So it's really amazing to make something, and then the next day you can come to work, put on the virtual reality gear and see it working in a virtual world, which is different from previous experiences that I've had where you've kind of make something and wait for it to get implemented or wait for the production to get into like rendering and comp phase. It's like a really cool, stimulating, interactive process, which is cool. So you can also see how things are working, and then if you need to go back to the drawing board or change anything, you know, you have the flexibility to kind of do that.
It kind of feeds into that same idea of making something and putting it out there and seeing how people react to it. Yeah. It's like you shouldn't be trusting your own judgment as far as possible on what is good and what isn't. You have an idea and you think it might be good, so you do it even if you do it shoddily at first, and you just like put it out there and see how people react, and then gauge what is good and what isn't, rather than try and think you're some kind of game developer genius who just knows what people are going to like. Because I just find that people who make games in that way, that like very top down, plan out everything and then make it, those games just don't turn out as good as often in my experience.
I think you can also go crazy doing that. I don't know if you guys saw that documentary, I think it's called Indie Gamer.
Yeah, the Indie Game, the movie,
and others. And the one, I think it's a 2-man team, and then the other guy's like a 1-man team. And by the end, they're like, they're sort of half human by the time they actually get around to publishing, because they work in such isolation, and they don't want to like release an update. They just want to do something perfect. And you can see that personality type weighs on them, because by the time it's out, you know, there's so much riding on that one version to be absolutely perfect.
I mean, that's terrifying. And it's just like, you have no idea. So you spend like 3 years and all that money on a project, and you actually have no idea whether people even like the game in the first place. So, I mean, it worked for, I think the game that is like Braid and Fez. Or those that were developed like that. And it worked out in both those cases. But the documentary, it was Super Meat Boy. But that documentary did follow several different games, and they only put the success stories in there. So it kind of like skews it towards, okay, here is cases where it does work, and it is possible for anything to work, but your probability of succeeding and your stress levels while succeeding will just be much lower if you develop openly and iteratively.
I like the idea as well that, I mean, you made a demo and then you kind of put it out publicly. So you're not pitching to execs, you're not pitching to your bosses, you're just pitching to the audience, and then, you know, their reaction drives the decision of the company to an extent. Yeah,
I mean, otherwise you're just trusting some other guy's judgment. You're trusting some like exec, and why should he know better than the game designer what the audience would like? Why not just like pitch it straight to the audience? People also have this fear of showing something too early when it's like in a rough state, that people are going to see it in that state and then kind of not look at it a second time, which is also a bit of it's just a wrong conception. Like, you're not going to get everybody in the world to look at your prototype anyway. Like, rather see if the people who do look at it like it than like obsess about getting it perfect before putting it out there the first time.
Yeah, I mean that was the story with Broforce as well, wasn't it? They were working on another game, and they realized after a while that this little side project was getting more traction than their main project, and made the decision to throw out there.
Exactly the same thing. There was like for even when I joined the company just as they made that switch from I think the other project was called Slice Fight to Broforce. And even then we had like everything in the game, the entire game, available for free online while we were developing it. And that had just allowed us to build up so much steam by the time we got to Steam that that it all went like pretty easily. And we never felt like we were taking this big risk with this game because we just knew this was a product that people wanted.
Of course, there was another big risk involved with Broforce.
Getting sued.
Which was the possibility of getting sued. And I like that. I saw an interview with Evan where he said their kind of safeguard against that was asking a lawyer who advised them that yes, they probably would get sued, but that they could claim it was a parody and protected under the rights of parody. Was there a kind of a critical mass moment where the game is making more money than you think you could reasonably that Fox could reasonably ignore?
Well, interestingly, we weren't that worried about getting sued, I think, because we knew we were fine legally. But we did get this email from Lionsgate, which does own the rights to a bunch of the different movies. Yeah. Right about the time Expendables 3 was being made, and obviously getting that email and hearing they want to get on a Skype call with us was a little bit worrying.
For sure.
But then it turned out that they liked Broforce so much they wanted to do an official licensed tie-in. And that's the story of how Expendables originated. So yeah, we did hear from the industry eventually, but it was in a positive way, and they wanted to work with us. So that was really awesome.
That is pretty cool. So that's that kind of great like outcome has I know it's got a little caveat as well, that apparently you guys were so relieved that you weren't being sued that you said, you know what, we'll do it for free.
I don't think that was okay. I don't think we should have asked for money, because really? As soon as if you work with a big IP holder like that and you're exchanging money, you're going to be put under so much constraint, and you're going to have to tick so many boxes to get it to something that they're really happy with being in line with their IP. Where if no money exchanges hands, it kind of opens you up to be more free with what you're doing. And in the end, they promoted Expendables, and Expendables helped promote the movie. So it was just a mutually beneficial exchange. That was definitely worth the 3 months of time it took out of Broforce's development. Right. And I think because it was kind of like this new, fresh thing, we managed to get it to a point where even the people who had already paid for Broforce at the time and were waiting for Broforce were happy with this new content. So it didn't upset anybody. I think it was mutually beneficial for Expendables, the movie, Broforce, the game, and the Broforce fans.
What were some of the inspirations for GORN?
I think GORN was really from watching people play other VR games, not even combat ones. I think it was Budget Cuts is one and Selfie Tennis is another. That also had one is a tennis game, and it has these spectators around the court, and you could hit the spectators with your racket, and people would play tennis for 30 seconds and then spend 10 minutes hitting those characters with their rackets. And Budget Cuts is also some spy game where you're sneaking around with robots, or trying to avoid robots. And the same thing, people would sneak around for 1 minute and then spend 10 minutes playing with a ragdoll of this robot enemy. And I was like, why is there no game that's just about beating up ragdolls? And
Right, interesting. What do you think it is about, on a slightly more philosophical topic, what do you think it is about violence that people really like to be involved with?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's I probably should spend more time thinking about this because I'm making an extremely violent game that is it's not even just a traditional game you press a button and violence happens, but in GORN you really have to do the violence manually yourself. And it's just something that people just seem to respond to. I can't really say. Maybe I think there's just something inside humans that makes them want to kill stuff, I guess. I don't think there's a more complex answer than that.
Power.
Yeah, and there's like an obvious power fantasy
trips,
that especially men like to indulge in.
I was going to say, because you used the word humans, I was curious what your male-female split is. Do you have any insight into that?
It's hard to track, but it
saw
would obviously be
trailer,
massively skewed towards males.
Because in your trailer you had a point of having a woman playing, which was an interesting choice.
Yeah, that was the Ben Roche, the director of the video, was really set on having Annie play that role, and I think it was like a pretty good choice in the end. I think she had the right attitude, and she kind of subverted expectations just enough to make the trailer interesting.
Yeah, so you're gonna maybe pull in some more female players without actually.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that kind of violent fantasy is really something that females are keen to indulge on.
Well, I don't know.
I've seen having demoed the game a fair bit, girls tend to start off way more reserved when they start playing the game, but they almost get more into it a few minutes into it. It's been a weird dynamic.
I think it might have something to do with, war is a rite of passage for men.
Right.
Now that we don't have one anymore.
Yeah, I think
it's been a while since our last war in this country.
But I also think it goes down to what makes video games in general engaging, and people have been sitting for years on their couches playing violent video games through a console and getting cheap thrills and feeling good about that. And it's GORN really does just push that to another level, where you don't just have 4 buttons which are different attacks. You are physically attacking people. So it's I wouldn't say that it's too different, but I would say it's a lot better in some ways in terms of the combat and violence and the experience.
You're right,
but I don't think that it's reinventing the age-old question about why do violent video games sell, or why do people love it?
I think there is it's easy to make a violent game more engaging, because you want to give good feedback to something that the player does, right? If the player scores a goal in Rocket League, for instance, the ball explodes and all the cars get flown away. So even there, the strongest point of feedback to the player in Rocket League is something violent. And it's just it's easy if you're hitting something in GORN and it's a human and the head pops off and there's blood that's spraying everywhere. That's a lot of easy feedback to give. Where if you're making a non-violent game, finding that positive feedback is harder. So I think
it's a very eccentric way to look at it.
It's true. Well, I mean, if you're making an Arkanoid game, for instance, the game is much better if it hits a block and the block pops into lots of different particles and makes cool trails and things like that. And yeah, it's easier to achieve with violent games for sure, good visual feedback. And it's also easier to condense a lot of information if the game is violent. So for instance, I don't have to do any explanation of who you are or what your goals are, or how to play the game, what is good and what is not good in GORN, because I just put you in a gladiator pit and you understand all that intuitively.
So there's no on-ramp, massive on-ramping process.
Yeah, it's just you immediately understand what your goal is in the game and what the rules are of being a gladiator without me having to explain anything. So if I wanted to do a similarly visceral thing, I don't even know what it would be, where it was also about interacting with objects in VR in a rewarding way. Just explaining those rules and getting the player to intuitively understand them would be much harder. Yeah. So it's almost from a design point, making a violent game is just low-hanging fruit, because that explanation is much simpler.
Do you think that also adds to the immersiveness, is the fact that you put the headset on and all of a sudden you're in this world? You don't really need to go through a huge section of training. You're kind of just in this world and there's free reign. And
there's something very primal happening, which you can understand without
bashing a guy's head with a rock.
Or having your head bashed. That's the bit that makes you actually get the heart palpitation. Yeah, I guess one reason it kind of stands out amongst violent games is, the name, as far as I understand, actually. It's a portmanteau for gore porn.
Yeah, that name probably should have been changed, because it was it was the joke name of the project when we did a 1-day version of it originally in April last year or something. You need some placeholder name to call the project in Unity, and that just came up, and then then 6 months later in Mauritius, we were like, okay, well, we kind of need to find a real name for this game now, because like GORN is a ridiculous thing to be calling your game. And we had like a vote. We took suggestions from everybody, and nobody could come up with something better than GORN.
It is pretty good.
Yeah, I think that,
I thought it might have something to do with that race of terrible aliens from the early Star Trek.
Right. I know that scene really well by now. I think like I would have liked to call the game GORN or some other like 4-letter word that sounds like that, because it's like it's a good sounding word for the game regardless. And I think the like gore porn association is probably more unfortunate than good. But I think like beyond that, it's good. And even like, I mean, you get games that set out to be shockingly violent, and GORN isn't quite like that. It's like very humorous and cartoony in its depiction of violence, which is something that we've really been trying to maintain. I mean, the audience laughs the whole time when terrible things are happening, which is kind of an attempt to offset the horrible things that I'm expecting the player to do in the game.
Is that part of your kind of brief? Is to make it really, really violent but kind of funny?
Yeah, it's been. I think that's been one of the trickiest things, is trying to find that balance, because from the start, Ruan has been quite like stern about like having that balance of humor and gore, and like offsetting the violence with like a comedic effect, and that kind of translates throughout the game. And hopefully it's going to be emphasized more as we kind of push on with the project. And it's like part of like why the characters are like kind of cartoony, and you know why the kind of audience has like huge googly eyes and things like that. It's just like to kind of subdue the violence in a way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you know you're reaching like the uncanny valley if your proportions get too correct, and then people start feeling a bit weirded out.
It's really tough. It's like it's a very difficult balance to get right, because like I think most artists are going to want to just go in and make like rad looking great work, but to try and find that balance like requires some restraint in a way. You kind of have to make things look good, but at the same time, you know, make things not look too good. Too violent.
I think
it's been
the other balance that has been interesting to strike on the art side is kind of getting things to look good in VR, which is different than getting something to look good on a 2D screen, because the VR screen is actually like relatively small. I'm not sure what the resolution is, but it's comparable to a normal screen. But because your eyes are focused on such a small portion of the screen, the actual resolution of the object you're looking at is quite low. So we've had to kind of try and come up with an art style that works at this like low resolution and fidelity, and doesn't show more detail than it needs to.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So what's been the solution? Is it kind of
trial and error, I guess. Lots of trial and error. I'm just looking at things in the game as we go along. So as we implement stuff, we kind of check it out, and I think trying to like break things down into like stages. So kind of prototyping things as we go along. So for instance, like the honey badger, I guess, is a good example of how we're doing things now, where we kind of just kind of start off really basic, see that the functionality is there, and then move to the next phase, which would be like a bit more detail, and then pushing it on once we're happy with how things work over the line in terms of the art style. But the whole time we're like looking at it in VR and looking at the functionality and trying to keep an eye on the artistic side of things as well, to make sure everything kind of cements into the GORN environment and world.
I heard this honey badger mentioned. Is he an actual honey badger?
I don't know.
There's a honey badger. Yeah, there's a honey badger in the game.
Is a honey badger?
People want to fight animals all the time, and this is again like this is another thing of those like violence things. Like I'm okay with you killing white dudes in the game, but I don't really want people to be killing animals.
White dudes specifically, interesting. I didn't even think of them as having a color. They just like looked like
right. Well, that's the other thing is because like. Yeah, if you make everybody white, then race is kind of not an issue in the game. But this is a long conversation. Like figuring that out and kind of doing it right is like quite a thing. But we hopefully we solved the violence against animal things by making it a honey badger. And as everybody knows, like honey badgers are pretty much indestructible. So it's impossible for you to kill the honey badger. You can hit him and you can knock him around and you can hit him out of the arena. But you can't kill the honey badger at all. Right. So you kind of get to have the animal and you can still hit it, but you're not actively hurting an animal. And he looks like an absolutely crazy rabid maniac thing.
And you can use him as a weapon.
And you can use him as a weapon.
Or you can.
He's kind of more like a toy.
Is he a honey badger size?
Yeah.
So you're fighting a Well, I'm glad you're creating awareness of honey badgers.
It's an amazing animal.
They're
Like,
incredible,
I love honey badgers. While we were talking about the art as well, I think it's worth mentioning that one of the things we found that works in VR, or that I think we found, is being really selective and deliberate with where you put detail on things. So for the most part, the textures in GORN are not quite flat shaded one color, but they're kind of close to it with some hues, and then just like deliberate pencil outlines in places that we want detail.
There's also a few other aspects just to add on to that, which is like the way that the blood kind of splatters, which is like one of the earlier things that we kind of spoke about, which was like having like normal maps and things like that on the walls and the floors and the doors in the pit, so having things slightly more like detailed, so that when blood kind of splatters on it, it really looks cool with the specular highlights and so on. And then trying to like as we kind of move out of the main focal point of the fighting pit, trying to like subtly like drop the fidelity of like those maps and so on, so that we don't have that same level of detail. And then you've obviously got to try use the textures to tie them all in to the same environment and world. So there's all kinds of things like that you have to kind of be aware of, like where to add detail, where not to add detail.
Yeah, I think it's something that's worked well in GORN is the normal maps are really detailed. And you can subtly pick up on the detail of the normal map while you're playing, but it doesn't add to that like visual noise. Like if you use a high quality, high resolution texture in VR and you see it from a distance, it's just noise. But a high definition normal map doesn't just kind of degrade into being like a noisy blob, like I feel like high quality textures generally do. So it allows us to still have like more detail, and especially like Marcelle mentioned, when something gets colored and covered in blood, the diffuse is actually just pure red, and all the detail on it comes from lighting and normal map and specular. So you kind of get like that very simple texture, but you still get to see some definition of the underlying object through normal map.
I wanted to ask, I guess it's a question for both of you, but the setting, the environment that you chose, I thought was really interesting. It's these floating heads that are whispering and muttering in a way that's extremely like anxiety inducing. You know, it made me think of the original Planet of the Apes, where everything's just like a little bit
off.
A little bit off, like there's something very strange going on in this world. And is this like, were your friends worried about you?
Not as worried as I was about them after watching them play. No, I think it was partially a deliberate decision, and I think partially the version that you played was quite early on of the game as well. But we were definitely trying to hit some uncanniness, especially early on in development. I think that has kind of subsided a bit, and we're going for more of a cartoony angle.
Right.
But I especially felt like being in VR, regardless of what the experience was that you're in, has this like uncanny, unsettling experience. And I felt like it was kind of important to acknowledge that like that inherent uncanniness of being in VR in some way by like kind of accentuating it, especially initially. Right now, after having spent a lot of hours in VR, I don't get that sense of uncanniness anymore, but I feel like a lot of players have that. And yeah, those original player heads also had this because they were like very rigid and just kind of stared at you. They gave off this very weird feeling of being looked at. They almost had this like this air of expectation on their faces, like they're really like angsty about you getting to it and doing stuff. And I kind of like that feeling, and we've been trying to recapture it and like build on it in a way.
Were you going for that, like with the original designs, or did it just sort of that's what you ended up with and you liked it?
I feel like it's been a pretty strong like a set theme from the beginning, but I wasn't there for the first few months. So. It was
like partially accidental. I knew like really early on that I wanted like a crowd in the game that responds to what the player is doing, because it's I mean, it fits with the gladiator theme. And in fact, I think like the gladiator theme came from wanting to have a crowd that reacts to the player. And then that the placeholder head, the only head that I could find that had like a movable jaw in one of our old projects was from Super Wolfenstein. And it had this like hilarious Nazi head in there. And then it was already bad enough there was one of them, but if there was like 40 of them surrounding you, it was just even better. So, and then it was like, okay, well, this actually works in like a weird way. How can we like improve on it and make it deliberate rather than just some accident? you kind of accidentally discover a lot of things that you wouldn't have thought of, and people react to things in ways that you wouldn't have thought of, and then it allows you to just make a better game.
I believe there was a GORN language that developed it somewhere along the...
And there's a dictionary.
Whose baby was that? Because that's quite a specific...
We had a guest here for a while, and he's a writer by trade. He designs narrative games, but he's also a pretty big GORN fan. Like, I think he's probably played the most out of anybody.
In the world?
Ooh, I don't know, but like definitely around here. And we had this like long conversation about the crowd and listening to the crowd. So the crowd kind of mumbles in the background, but you don't want them to just be saying blah, 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 because you can clearly hear it's not people talking.
Yeah.
You don't want them to be speaking English, because then you really pick up on the repetition of phrases like really quickly. So ideally it's like some set of nonsense syllables similar to Simoleon that they're speaking. And
similar to?
Simoleon, like what the Sims speak.
Oh, right.
So you kind of want something like that where it kind of sounds like people speaking, but it's nonsensical.
Yeah.
And he literally disappeared for a weekend. Nobody knew where he was. And on the Monday, he called me to his room, and all over his wall were just like pasted like pages with like writing on it. And he was like, I made a language.
and a written language as well. So it's like in all forms of the language was created. Yeah,
so that's what the gladiator is. They're always saying something. They're not just speaking nonsense, but because you don't understand it, you don't pick up the repetitions aren't that annoying. Like I really, especially like FIFA games where you hear the commentary repeat sometimes, I really find that obnoxious. But because you don't understand what they're saying,
quotable though.
I feel like it works better, and it's just like it's a nice world building thing, because it kind of
it's like Klingon. You get people who actually like speak Klingon at conventions. Maybe that can be like a goal.
Well,
have a GORN
it's like
spoken entirely in Gornish.
It's a fairly simple language, so I'm sure people will figure out parts of it eventually. But it's just like this. You kind of make this language to fit the character, and then you work on the language, and then because of certain things about how the language works. It informs further decisions on the personality of the characters. So it's been like a pretty successful world building thing, and I think it'll make the universe of GORN be more interesting than it would have been if we had used English or something.
Yeah.
When I came to your guys' base in Mauritius and said this is my first time playing VR, you were very cautious. You were like, maybe you shouldn't play my game.
I think it's not the best first introduction to VR, because it's just like it is a bit intimidating.
It is a bit
big guys like waddling towards you, and you're still like, you're still coming to grips with the uncanniness of being in a virtual reality. And now you have to like fight like 3 seconds into it. I don't think it's the best introduction.
Well,
it was a bit scary.
Like, to be fair, like my girlfriend came over to Mauritius and it was her first time playing, experiencing VR, and we threw the headset on her, and GORN was her first game. And at first she was shrieking like when they were walking up to her, and about 15 minutes later, like I think there was a crowd of people around, like cheering her on, like watching her kill people, and she really like got carried away.
She is really the case in point of like girls who seem to be more reserved when they start playing GORN, but like a couple minutes into it, you see a side that you never knew.
Yeah.
I think I was more just worried about breaking your TV, because I had done a bunch of karate, and like I kept advancing because that's what you should do, but then forgetting that there's a actual limit to how far you're allowed to go. And I know you've got a brag book of people who have like smashed things in their home and sent it to you. But one thing I really liked, as you mentioned earlier, is that it does, like, the results come from physical effort, because I find it very disappointing when you do something like Wii boxing. Actually, the more you play it, the more you realize you just have to stand like this and maybe move the remote slightly. You don't actually have to throw your weight into it in order to get a result. So is that something you've also aimed for?
That is something I feel hugely strong about. Like I see some VR games where you could just as well play the game with a gamepad and 3 buttons. There's like one boxing game, Knockout League, and you have to dodge, but you have to dodge in a very specific way. Your head has to move this amount of time, or this amount of distance in this amount of time, and then it counts as a dodge. Otherwise, the enemy's punch still hits you. So it's not using any of the possibilities of VR. It's just like you press the dodge button by moving your head. And similarly, you press the punch button by moving your hand. It's not like looking at what you're actually doing. So you can never like discover something in that game that the designer didn't intentionally put in there. Whereas in GORN, I've seen lots of people discover things that I didn't know was possible just because it's all built around this like congruent physics rules that allow for this emergence. I think it's like...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's... I don't know why people kind of build games, especially in VR, that have those like very set rules. I think like some of it is just like that's how games generally are made traditionally, and it's also people are kind of concerned in the game like breaking in an unexpected way. But I think like if you're able to break the game in a new and interesting way, that's like a fun experience for the player, and you're cutting out so much possibility by kind of narrowing things down and constraining it to your vision. That I don't think that's that's not the kind of games that I make in general, but I definitely don't think that that's the correct way of making VR games.
I think there was a not VR but a nice example from Broforce was your flying pig glitch.
Right.
Where the more you stab the pig, the more it bounces, so that you can actually fly up to new levels just by continually stabbing a pig and kind of riding it as it bounces.
Yeah, so that's just a straight up bug, and we left that in because it was so entertaining. But it's still like this like emergence of a bunch of different factors that comes along. I mean, I've been using this example a lot in GORN, but it's like one of my favorite ones of things that I didn't know that you could do, that I only discovered when I saw a person do it. This one guy was playing, and there was an enemy with a bow, and he grabbed an arrow off the ground and knocked it into the enemy's bow, and while the enemy was still holding it in his hand, pulled it back from him and shot him in the face with the bow that the enemy was still holding in his hand. And I had no idea that was possible. Wow. But it's just because everything consistently follows the rules. If there's an arrow near a bow, it gets knocked, and it gets pulled in whatever direction it's pulled in, and when it's released, it fires. Just because those are the rules, and the game doesn't like try and do other constraints that, oh, well, it has to be the same hand or the other hand of the same person that's holding the bow, or other kind of constraints that would prevent something like that happen. I've also seen, because the enemies have to do like honest bow firing, which just means like they actually have to move their hand to an arrow, grab the arrow, move the hand to the bow, knock the arrow, and then pull it back and then release, rather than just play some like fire bow animation. Because they have to do all those things, there are sometimes like really interesting emergent things that happen. For instance, there's a mode in which you can set the head sizes of the enemies to something ridiculous. And if the head size is really big and they're at a particular angle, they're not able to reach the bow to grab an arrow. So they just kind of stand there fumbling, trying to grab an arrow. So I mean, it's utterly stupid, and it probably shouldn't be in the game. But if it happens to the first time when the player sees it, it's hilarious, and it's like a good moment. So I think it's better to have those things in the game, and to kind of be okay with your game looking bad and like having stupid things happen, because amazing things will also happen from those same circumstances.
Have you had to deal with the motion sickness, that kind of teething problem at all? I know you're available on Oculus and Vive, right?
Yeah.
So with Oculus, I guess.
The motion sickness is a complicated issue. It also seems that the more time you spend in VR, the more resistant you are to it. I think because I spent a lot of time in VR early on when the hardware wasn't as advanced, there were a lot of tracking issues, and you would kind of like fly off into space every once in a while. So you get immune to motion sickness pretty early. And initially I thought I would get around motion sickness by not putting any kind of artificial movement in the game. But as it's gotten along, and as I've gotten more used to it and realized that the game is better if with artificial locomotion, I've kind of just put different methods in and some comfort options that should help people who are less used to VR or more prone to motion sickness to still have a good experience.
Can you tell me what you mean by artificial motion?
So in room scale VR, you can obviously move anywhere in your play space.
Yes.
So that's natural motion.
Yeah, gotcha.
But if you then move that play space bounds and you push the player's head in a direction that they're not physically moving, that's artificial movement. And it's that artificial movement when your point of view or the camera is moving without your inner ear sensing that movement that generally causes motion sickness.
Right. So I had quite an interesting conversation with you guys when I was in Mauritius about the the kind of long-term prospects for VR. And I was wondering, how do you guys feel will be, like, where will its ultimate home be? Will it be in arcades with big spaces, or will it be in homes with big spaces, or will we eventually solve the big space problem and make all the technology smaller?
Yeah, geez. It's still hard to tell.
I want a kid at home, so like that's my answer. I think home users are gonna want it. Like people are gonna want to play this or these kinds of games like in their own home and like feel safe and kind of be aware of their surroundings.
But that might keep the bar to entry quite high.
Yeah,
cost.
I mean, I'm just speaking from like my own personal point of view, and like I want my own like setup at home so I can play like especially GORN in the comfort of my own home as much as I want whenever I want, and I think like it's really an immersive thing, and I think some people might feel more comfortable playing these kind of things at home, going to an arcade. Like I don't know. We'll have to see. Like,
because I've just been thinking about and wondering whether it's going to end up being like almost like a patronage system or like a crowdfunding thing where, because it is quite an expensive thing to implement, you'll have indie developers getting funds from private individuals to develop a game that they see potential in, and then the other idea is that it's going to have to be funded by corporates whose business model is like owning the real estate where the arcade is, basically.
Yeah.
So going back to, my childhood, like going to a gaming arcade, putting your tokens in the machine and bringing that whole vibe back.
That is already, that's happening in lots of places.
I'm sure it's happening in Asia.
In South Africa, well, the houses are generally big enough that most people have play space, but that's not the case in most major cities. So I think, most major cities have some VR arcade, and that's one way. I'm not sure what the future of VR is. I'm kind of trying to not be dependent on it, but I think it is. Well, I mean, I'm not betting the farm on making a VR game that has to sell 100,000 copies to be successful, which I think is a foolish thing to do, regardless of VR. And a lot of games are being funded, especially by Oculus. So that's also happening, and it's really the only way you can make a big budget VR game right now is by direct funding from, for example, Oculus. But I think, VR is just going to kind of slowly grow. I think it's maybe 2 to 5 years away from being commonplace, not maybe as a console, but at a comparable level to consoles. It's still a few years away, but I think it'll kind of get there where most people who are interested in gaming and have space for it will have some kind of VR kit, and probably about 5 years from now, I think.
I was chatting to a film director who made the interesting point that a film is something that we kind of know what it is. It's like a 90-minute to 2-hour structure that's going to have characters and a story at the least, and some other elements that you can kind of predict, like it'll have a score, for instance. But with VR, which now you can direct for VR, which is a new thing, we don't know what it is. It can be so many different things, and it's just up to the audience to tell them what they like. Do you think there's the same kind of, are you feeling the same kind of flexibility as game developers and designers?
That's been my favorite thing about making a VR game, is exactly the fact that the space is so unexplored. And like I say, I had a bunch of ideas about how a VR game should play that other people weren't doing, and so far it looks like I've been correct about those things, and it's been fun to have this untrodden space where you still get to experiment. Whereas if you make a normal game, it's been so well explored, flat games, as VR devs tend to call them. If you make an FPS, you kind of know what the conventions are you need to follow, and you have a pretty good idea of what works and what doesn't. Whereas in VR, nobody really knows. Everybody's still figuring it out, and that's a lot of fun.
Is there do you guys have a good network of global game designers for VR that you all chat to?
Not really at all. I know one or two. We've been kind of just figuring stuff out on our own. I feel like it's still so early on in VR dev that there aren't really a lot of games that are high quality, that are you should play this game and learn how to make a VR game. I don't think that those games really exist. The good games take long. So I think they'll come in the next year or so. But besides one or two people, it's not really, there's no tight-knit VR dev community that I'm a part of.
But there are
I'm sure they exist.
There are a lot of like we were talking about earlier. There are a whole lot of YouTubers that are making content. So it's like may not have like other people to necessarily speak to, but we've got a lot of stuff to watch and learn from, including ourselves and others here playing. Like this VR setup here is usually always busy, and people are always playing. So it's like pretty easy to kind of gauge what needs to be tweaked out or fixed or attended to, or what people want.
Because I know there was, because you're making these advances with like procedural animation and stuff, is there a balance to be struck between like how much an animator can bring?
Well, actually, surprisingly, on this game, there isn't that much animation coming from my side. The animation is all pretty much done on Ruan's side through physics. Yeah. So I'm supplying him with stuff, but essentially, like he's animating stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and in GORN currently there's detail, like for instance the gladiator's faces animate using blend shapes, but that's the closest thing we have to traditional animation. There's a scroll that flaps in the wind and one or two other tiny things. The rest of the animation is entirely physics and procedural, which, this is our first game of this scale that uses that technique, although we've used it in one or two previous experimental projects. And after a year of learning, what we're now shifting towards is trying to find a hybrid solution between this like fully procedural, physics-driven and traditional animation. Because the physics-driven thing is great for its emergence, but it's really intensive on programmer time. Like I have to do now all the animations, and it's time-consuming and difficult. And
we have more about the resources at the beginning rather than. Because it also helps to keep the game smaller, right? If you can hard code more into it.
But it's like either an artist or a programmer is doing the animation. Like it has to be done regardless. And this procedural system isn't very accurate, especially when you want the character to take a specific pose. It's kind of intuitively, it's easier to understand it as a puppet on strings, and I'm just kind of pulling strings all the while. So if you're not a puppeteer, then getting a character in a specific pose is really hard, and they don't quite work like strings, but it's close enough. So ideally, you would kind of have an animation that's done by a skilled animator, and then get the physics side to kind of copy that animation as far as possible. And that's something we'll be experimenting with going forward. And I feel like that's kind of, for indie games, that surely has to be... there's going to be a couple of amazing games in the next few years that uses a system like that. Like GORN's doing it now, and it's done well, partly because of that. And there are other people that are also doing these physics, traditional hybrid animation solutions that will certainly do well, because you get so much for free out of it. For instance, if a GORN enemy is doing an attack animation, he can be interrupted at any point during that swing and respond to an impact dynamically and intuitively, which you can't do with just a traditional animation system. Like there's too many animations you would have to blend and create. But yeah, and then the issue with the physics, the pure physics, is just that it's not accurate enough and it's very clumsy looking. And you're kind of constrained to doing like a goofy cartoonish game like GORN is.
Is it safe to say that like you also don't necessarily have like animation tools that you're using? You're kind of like of using a different set of methods to get the animations to work. Whereas like if it had to come from my side, obviously I would like supply you with poses or keyframes, animations, and so on. And I'm using like tools from my side that are made for animation. Whereas on your side. We work with a variety of programs, but on the GORN side...
Everything you're doing is Unity.
Yeah. Okay. And it's like very hard-coded, very obtuse, because it's just kind of... I have no animation background. I don't know how to describe an animation to a game, right? Like, that's not something I'm familiar with, so... The GORN system is not that great, but, you kind of learn, and in the future we'll definitely... Just to get those like fine movements, like, for me, I can't even imagine how I would make a gladiator scratch his chin. I think it's just like impossible in the current system, where if it was like a better hybrid system, then that would be like a fairly trivial thing. And you can kind of get an animator to knock out like 10 animations, or even if they're just like keyframes and you kind of interpolate between them using physics, you'd be able to do like 20 animations in the time it takes me to do like 1 or 2,
which literally like changes the gameplay to a phenomenal amount. Like it all of a sudden becomes so much more like, what's the word, dynamic to fight one of these gladiators, because they're fighting, they're still dynamic and physics based, but they're being guided by a set bunch of moves, whereas right now the way everyone's doing it is great, but it's like
they're
super
like
time consuming.
I think there's like 10 attack animations. So unfortunately, like GORN is a bit too far advanced right now to kind of be able to just rip out that animation system, and the hybrid solution does still require some R&D. So right now it's like purely physics. There's no traditional animation still. We'll do some experiments maybe and see if we can fit in a little bit of it, but I don't think it's wise to kind of just try and switch that out in GORN right now. Like there are some other complications as well. Like for instance, like the weapons have different weights, and the weights matter, and they matter to how a weapon is swung by a gladiator. So you have to compensate for that in different ways depending on the animation system used, especially if you're incorporating physics. And that's like a bunch of R&D. How do you get this animation to be remotely consistent regardless of the weight of the weapon? And a bunch of just other small issues. Like there's going to be a lot of tweaking and stuff, but I'm sure that the end result will be worth it.
Do you have like a way to tie a bow on GORN and say it's done now, or do you?
Yeah, I think it just, like there isn't like a, like I say, we basically take it week by week, or a little bit longer, I guess, like month by month. And I guess at some stage we'll see that, like, the marginal benefit of adding content to the game is quite low. We're keen to be working on different projects, and we'll kind of like plan then what would make us feel happy to say GORN is not finished, and take it from there.
Right. Marcelle, what's the learning curve coming from like a character animation background or a content background into
not being able to
gaming?
do character animation? It's
Is it just
learning curve, I guess, like being more heavily reliant on like the sculpting side of things, like the rigging side of things is all pretty much the same, if not slightly easier, because I'm not having to set up controls and so on. But yeah, learning curve, I guess I'd have to just say, getting to grips with like not being able to animate stuff. But yeah, mostly just like coming to terms with the fact that like this particular production like relies slightly more on like asset creation and stuff like that from the art side, obviously, as well as other things, but like not having the control over that, which is something I'm not necessarily too used to.
right? Do you feed in other ways, like directing performance?
Not really. I mean, if I see something that's off, I'll call it, but I wouldn't say that happens often at all. Like, Ruan's pretty on top of his game. So, yeah.
Right, okay. And the next VR project is something sci-fi, is that right?
Well, I mean, we haven't something that we want to experiment with, but we'll do our games one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just seeing if I could get any gossip.
Yeah, well, there's just I really want to make like a Maker VR game. I think that's another space that people are attempting but not doing well at the moment, and I want to also have a go at it. But GORN has to be finished first. So
Who is GORN? Is GORN the world, or is GORN a dude in the world?
nobody knows. I think we had like
I have my suspicions it's Ruan's alter ego.
we'll see. I think GORN is a state of mind.
Have you got ambitions of introducing more story?
We'll see. Like the convention, like again, like because it is in this gladiator setting, you kind of don't need to answer these questions because players inherently, you assume that you're a slave and you're trying to fight for your freedom. So whether we want to follow that or whether we want to eventually subvert that expectation, I don't feel matters. Like there is like an implicit understanding of story there, and you don't need to embellish it unless you want to.
I also feel like from watching countless people play, I honestly don't feel like anybody has the time for like a campaign or a storyline. Like people, as soon as they're like done with the round and they're back in like the cell, they want to get right back out there and continue fighting. And I just feel like from my side, we might frustrate players by adding in some form of like narrative and like campaign. I mean, there is a campaign,
there is a
like
campaign
a
of
proper
sorts,
like
but not like
storyline and all that.
I don't want to make a player stand there and force them to look at my clever writing or anything. So I think we'll like build a world around some semblance of a plot, or at least like some semblance of a world around the player, but we won't ever force it upon the player where nothing happens in the game until you've looked at my entire piece of dialogue. I don't think that's something that we'll ever do. But if the player,
So
hopefully...
no cutscenes.
No cutscenes, but if the player does want to explore, hopefully we can put some stuff in there that informs them about the world a bit more.
I like the idea of a reveal. It reminds me of, what is that game called? The Colossus.
Shadow of the Colossus?
Shadow of the Colossus, where you kind of realize, spoiler alert, but you realize towards the end that you're basically on the wrong side.
Right.
It's not really a heavy-handed story, but at the end there is this kind of pathos, which is quite nice.
Yeah, so that kind of thing is interesting. We'll kind of see. Like, we don't actually have that many plans for the game. We just kind of take it on a week-to-week basis and do whatever we think is the coolest thing that we can be doing this week.
Don't tell Seb that.
How do you say, are you not entertained in Gornish?
I don't know.
Like, none of us can actually speak the language yet.
Kirodorki. I know like a few words here and there, but yeah, we'll see. I don't think, like, you don't have to make the joke because players already make it. As soon as you put that joke in the game, then the player doesn't get to make it anymore. Which is also kind of like an ethos we followed in Broforce. Like, we never let the Broforce characters say their catchphrase. Just let the player say it themselves. It's more fun that way. And yeah, once you do it, it's not funny anymore. Because now they hear it every time they see that character. And now it's just lame. Where if you do it every time you see the character, it stays funny. And I think, so kind of give the player space to make their own jokes.
I feel like those instincts are really your cachet as a company.
Yeah, I think like kind of doing less in the right places is something that people should be trying to do more, not like trying to put your ego at the forefront and showing how clever you are, but like kind of letting your work be dumb and letting the player do that work himself. I mean, for instance, like in Broforce, there's nothing that stops you in any of the levels of just like digging down a little and skipping the entire level by digging through the ground and then finishing it. Like even levels where that is much easier than doing it, we don't put any blockers there, even though we could have stopped the player from doing it. We don't do it because if that's what the player wants to do, let them do it. And people will kind of, whether they realize they pick up on it or not, they do pick up on that freedom, and it does definitely make the game better. Because again, it's that like question that the player asks, like, can I do this? And don't answer no unless you absolutely have to.
I think I remember there was also a rule of thumb for Broforce that everything in the game has to be explodable. Like, if
so
there's something that doesn't explode, then you haven't done your job.
So you can totally screw yourself over by blowing away all the geometry and not being able to finish the level. And it's like several levels where it's a possibility. And again, it's like, it's stupid when it happens, and it's sometimes even frustrating as a player, but having that possibility of doing that stupid thing makes the game better than it would be without it.
Can you blow up other players?
Initially in Broforce you could do it very easily, but it made the game much harder. So as we later on development made the game easier, we kind of restricted that. You can still like push barrels onto them and indirectly kill them, but you can't directly blow up your friends. But you can, like the end of level helicopter, for instance, you can shoot down and then it crashes on your friends. Or you can throw the enemy suicide terrorists, suicide vest guys. You can throw them at your friend and then he explodes. So you can like do those indirect things. And we found when we play, we spend because the game was so easy for us by the end of development, we spend most of our time trying to kill other people playing with us, and that's actually like a fun game in itself.
Was there any backlash from? I guess the whole thing is a bit of a dig at America's paternalistic war strategies. Was there any backlash from those lampooned?
Well, it's actually like it's a complex issue. Interestingly, the biggest backlash we got was from people feeling that the butt of the joke was the third world.
Okay.
That we're like making fun of third world countries because you can throw like a turkey stuffed with dynamite and then all the terrorists run towards it and like kind of dogpile it and then it explodes, obviously. And some people found that was offensive, that we're like implying that people in third world countries are this stupid and desperate, which I thought was a very odd conclusion to draw, because the game is obviously viewed through America goggles, right? And we're kind of making fun of this, like you say, this like kind of base American Hollywood perspective on the world. But I don't think anybody was ever upset at us for making fun of America, because it's kind of like in an adoring way, and it's also it's veiled behind making fun of the movies as well. So nobody really feels like personally offended by it, and I think it's something that we were aware of, and we're trying to kind of have our cake and eat it too, in a sense that the people who think that this like American bravado is stupid can see that the game is making fun of it and like the game because it's making fun of it. And people who think that American bravado is awesome just see like Broforce explosions, area liberated, eagles, bombs, and they're like, yeah, Broforce. So we kind of managed to skirt that line and get both sides behind the game.
Yeah, maybe just also talking about the rest of what you guys do here. You've got an update, I think, for gentle jousting coming up.
They're aiming for release out of early access. So
I
think next 2 months actually.
At the same time as Marais Joburg. I'm not sure what those dates are.
I was kind of curious just about how that like round table went when they decided to go for that title out of presumably a few that were pitched.
It's exactly the same as any other game. The prototype was made. This one we didn't put it online for free, but it was played at several conventions, and a video made it onto YouTube. And again, the reaction was just like amazing. And it was just like, you put this stupid game in front of an audience, and like 10 minutes later, everybody is having like really fascinating conversations about like sexuality and depictions of homosexuality in games and all these things that you wouldn't really expect something that is like on the surface that dumb to bring about. And I think that's just kind of been the driving factor. It's just every audience that we put it in front of reacted to the game in an entirely different way and had like new and interesting conversations develop around the game. And that just has been like, has driven the fascination in making it. But I wasn't personally involved. I just got to like watch the chaos in a lot of places.
I guess the one thing that like all of your titles have in common is that it gives you this like almost shock reaction. It's not
Shock factor.
yeah, it's kind of. And I was wondering if you have any guiding like brand image manifesto that you follow, or is it just like let's push this button?
You just do different things and throw them at the wall and see what sticks.
Like if I can add to that though, like generally I just feel like the people that are working here are all like we're all very different and very strange, but we all have the same kind of mentality towards these things, where it's like we're not trying to like deliberately shock people, but it's just like we're just being our strange selves.
For people who want to work here, what is your best advice? Animation professionals or animation students? What's a good thing to concentrate on?
From my side, personal work and trying to prototype and do game jams as much as possible. Find a good programmer and try and work as much as you can with him, because like that's the kind of foresight you're gonna need. You're gonna need to be able to do your work, but like try and understand as best you can like what's going to make a programmer's life easier, because the more you can take away from them, the more time they have to make the game work, like to actually program, which is what they should be doing. So and also sculpting, ZBrush, or any sculpting tool is a plus, and just trying to learn as much as they can with Unity now, so that when they do have to work with programmers or Unreal or whatever kind of engine they're using, but having a good understanding of what is needed is good. So I hope that answers it.
I think from my side, like skills are important, like being able to work with Unity and such, but you can pick those up, especially if you're not being hired for a senior position. But on average, the only thing that we care about if we're considering new employees is the strength of your portfolio. So make sure you have like quality work in your portfolio, that you have like a decent showreel, and that you show a variety, or that you show one thing that you do better than other people, and that you know what your strength is. And something else that we particularly look for is kind of just passion. Like, you can tell from looking at a person's portfolio, did they only do the homework assignments they got for class and that's their entire portfolio? Or was there something that they were working on after hours because they enjoy their work and because they take pride in their work? I feel like that's something that comes across really quickly in a portfolio. And that's kind of the X factor, is like, this person is spending their free time learning how to be better at what they're doing. That's the kind of person we want to work with.
That's interesting.
That goes, and I think for me, like that goes back down to like doing personal work, like exactly that. Like,
sure.
That's where you really get a sense of that person's flavor and style. It's from the work they do on their own time, not what like someone else is paying them to do or whatever the case is.
Exactly.
Although that's still important, it's like that's not like, this place isn't for like the average like cog in a wheel.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, definitely have to like be a bit of a jack of all trades, and I hate the saying a jack of all trades, master of none. But like working in an indie company, like I don't think a lot of people realize like you aren't just going to be doing one task. You aren't just going to be doing this one thing. You're not just going to be modeling. You're not just going to be like it's kind of essential in a way to at least have the foresight of all the different processes that go in. So it's like rigging, like animation, it's like cinematography, like lighting, like a good sense of colors, like having like traditional like skills like drawing and stuff like that all really do come into play, especially in a place like this where we're looking at something like a poster and we're all kind of commenting and stuff like that. It's like you're not going to sit here and just like press one lever. Like you're going to be pushing many, and the more you can push, or you're confident in pushing, and the more understanding you have, like again I'm repeating myself, of what's like needed on the other side of the fence, like really plays a huge role.
Yeah, I think Evan likes to talk about like T-shaped people, which is like a concept from Valve's like I don't know, employee guidelines thing a while ago, and that's just like you need a broad base of skills, but you also need to be specialized in one thing. And it's like both of those play a role.
So
and like
and you go deep.
Yeah, exactly. You do need like both to an extent. And we're not expecting you to be amazing at like everything, but you need to like at least have some insight into the processes around what you're specialized in.
Yeah.
And like Marcelle also mentioned, the reason personal work is so important, we're not hiring a person to come sit here and just do what we tell them in the style that we tell them. We want people who have their own vision and who bring their own style, and who can help us inform the style of the things that we make. So that, again, we can only see what your style is if you have personal work that wasn't prescribed to you by somebody else. Yeah. And that's also very apparent from a portfolio if this isn't the person's own creative vision.
If I can just add one last thing from my side about it, is just like, when I first came, like for my interview at Free Lives, I walked away and I immediately knew, and I picked up the phone and I called my girlfriend and I said, yeah, this place is amazing, I want to work here, but like I'm a little bit scared because it's not going to be a job, it's going to be a lifestyle.
I definitely get that feeling walking in.
I haven't been, I can't say I was wrong about that at all. And not to say that this is like slave labor and you're here all the time and you never have a life outside of it, but it really just is, it's a lifestyle, it's not a job. So if like someone's looking for a job here, that's probably not the right thing. But if you're looking for like, if
you just want to make like cool things,
you want to make cool things, and you're looking
if you
for
want to
a
be
good
involved
platform
in the things that you're making, I think that's something that we try really hard. Is everybody who's in the project has significant sway on the direction that it goes. And I think like that comes with benefits and drawbacks for sure.
Is that a hard thing to retain as the company grows and scales?
I think like my personal preference is for smaller projects, exactly for that reason, because each person on the project gets to have more agency. But certainly larger projects, that becomes really hard to maintain. So I guess we'll see next time we tackle a really large project, how that pans out.
Well, it's pretty great that you guys have blazed that trail. And on that note, do you take interns?
Yeah, we do take interns occasionally. We generally will take on like promising or interns that show an interest outside of class hours. So
Yeah, that's a big thing. I think it's just like it's not like a spoon feeding scenario. No one's gonna sit and like make sure you've done your work. You got to kind of just do your thing and be mature about it and have that self discipline to manage your time correctly.
things we all still struggle with. Speak for myself.
But it's kind of like, you want the person to feel personally invested in the project, because if the person feels that the project is theirs, then you don't need to track how many hours they work. Then
Exactly.
that will be reflected. They will be naturally motivated to work on it.
So there you go, gaming fans. You too can be part of the dream, as long as you're comfortable with the fact that at Free Lives, anything goes.
Can I pick up this weapon off the ground? Yes. Can I throw this weapon and does it work if I throw it? And yes. It's like, oh, can I pick up this head? Yes. Can I use the head as a weapon? Yes.
Visit freelives.net to follow the gang's enlightening dev blog and keep track of future game jam opportunities. This has been Animation Essays Podcast. See you back here real soon.